Hi, Rise. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We send you greetings from springtime. We're really excited that spring is here. And we're also excited about an upcoming Rise Parent Power Conference on Saturday, April 23rd. And it's from 10 to 2. At this conference, families will have an opportunity to help us launch the second installment of Rise Roadmap, what every family of color should know as they apply. And they're also going to have an opportunity to meet admission directors from 14 member schools, or 14 schools. Some of them are our member schools. And they will get to participate in really great workshops, powerful workshops for not only current parents in independent school, but also families who are looking. So what we'd love for you to do is, if you live in the tri-state area, make sure that you make it to the event if school choice is important to you. And what you can do is, after you watch the video, there's going to be a link in the details section for this video that will allow you to learn more about the event, what schools will be there, what the titles of the workshops will be, and an opportunity to register as well. So we look forward to having you, and please share it with others. Today we have a lunch date with Urvi Mathur, who is with Test Rocker. And Test Rocker is an affiliate of Rise and is also one of the sponsors of the Rise Parent Power 16 on April 23rd. And they will be hosting a workshop at the event. And we also look forward to having them host a more curriculum-based workshop around standardized tests later on this spring, so we'll let you know more about it. So we want to welcome Urvi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So in addition to talking about how to take standardized tests at our workshop, as we mentioned, we're going to get into some deeper curriculum-based workshops that kind of mirror or mimic what you all are teaching about standardized testing with Test Rocker. But we had a few questions for you today. So can you help us kind of get a glimpse or remind us what colleges and universities are looking for when they look at a student's standardized test scores, the ACT and the SAT?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, a great place to start. The biggest thing I want to say is, since we are a test prep company, I do want to make it clear that SAT and ACT scores alone are not going to get you into a university or a college. However, they can be the reason that you don't get into a university or college. So it's important to know about them, understand them, and figure out which is the right one for you. So we do help with that. The reason that SAT and ACT are important to colleges and universities is that, think of any university, they get thousands of applications, right? So no admissions counselor is going to be able to read through every single application that they're going to get. So there has to be what I call a first line of defense, that your application needs to kind of get through in order to actually be read. So an easy way for them to sift through all these thousands of applications is to look at things like SAT scores, ACT scores, or GPAs, right? So like I said, they won't be the reason that you do get in, but they're not going to be, they might be the reason you don't get in. So, a lot of universities have cutoffs, or they have average SAT, ACT scores that you can easily see on their, on their profiles for each class that they admit. So that being said, the scores are important. The other thing that I will say is that they use the SAT, ACT scores to look at your college readiness, which means, it's not just about getting into the school. It's also about what's going to happen once you get in. You have to actually get through 4 years of classes and then finally graduate. So if your SAT, ACT scores and your GPA aren't that high, it's going to show the college or university that once you get in, you're going to kind of struggle in even some of their most basic classes, because the SAT and ACT, I'm going to say that word a lot, so it gets annoying, but those tests are testing for your conceptual understanding of specific topics that you're going to go on to be tested on more deeply in college. So having said that, it looks at college readiness, and it also is important to just kind of get you through that first line of defense. So those are the two reasons they're important.
Now, aren't there a certain growing population of colleges and universities that are just not even asking for standardized test scores?
Yeah, there are I don't think it's a very large number. And I think if you are looking at competitive schools, you know, even in the top 50 universities in the US, you're definitely going to be asked for SAT, ACT scores. And then on top of that, you might also be asked for subject tests, which are SAT specific, you know, subject tests that you have to take later on. So I would say small population, yeah, they're saying, you know, scores are not important to us, but I will say that the more information you provide in your application, the more knowledge they can get about you. So what you want is the most amount of information in your application, so they spend the most amount of time on your application, right? So when you have scores, it shows that, hey, I'm not scared to show you that I did take the SAT and ACT and I scored, you know, however well on it as possible. And every time you take the test, you don't, and we can get into this a little later, but you don't have to submit every single score of yours. So if you take the SAT and the ACT, you can choose whether you want them to see your SAT scores or the ACT scores. But most college admissions professionals will tell you that the more information they have about you, the more they're going to spend on your application.
Perfect. So there's some new tests out. I think it's with the SAT, not with the ACT. You want to talk about the new exams and which one is new?
Yeah, so the SAT did a full rehaul of their test. And the biggest criticism that they faced was that their tests were not showing college readiness. Their tests were kind of, you know, tricking students and weren't really showing admissions professionals what the students learned in high school. So that being said, they made the change to their test, and it's a pretty dramatic one. So now the scoring is out of 1,600. It was out of 2,400, and it's becoming more similar to the ACT. So that's what I would say about that. When we do our workshop, and this is another reason to sign up for the event coming up on April 23rd, is we're going to go more in depth and give you a little bit more understanding of the differences between the SAT, ACT, and the changes. But overall, the biggest changes are they're making the test more relatable to students. So vocabulary, let's say, for example, the words used to be really difficult on the vocab sections of the SAT. Now the words are still tough, but they're more reasonable words that you might actually use in school and in life going forward. The other things that they've done is they made the passages more relatable. So they're looking at passages in historical context. So you'll see things from, you know, the Declaration of Independence, et cetera, that students might actually be a little bit more familiar with. And then the other part is that the essay section on the new SAT is now optional. I always tell people that it doesn't matter that it's optional. You should always take it anyway, because if you apply to a university and they did require the essay section, you have to go back and sit for 3.5 hours and do the test all over again. So complete waste of your time. Please just take it with the essay. And one of the nicest improvements that they made is that they're no longer going to penalize you for wrong answers. So on the old SAT, I guess now it's old, yeah. So on the old SAT, you used to get a negative 1/4 of a point for every single question you answered wrong. So, you know, even if you could narrow it down to a few options, it was always kind of a risk to guess. Now you can guess. That being said, don't just guess on all of the questions. You still have to prepare. And I think the biggest thing that the test makers have done, SAT and ACT, is that they've said outright in public that test prep is needed. And that is an important thing to keep in mind, because for a very, very long time, the College Board said, you don't need to prepare for these tests. You learned this stuff in school. Yes, you did learn it in school, but you learned it in the 9th grade or maybe the 8th grade. And chances are you're taking the test in the 11th grade. So, you know, there's kind of a lapse in terms of when you learned the content and when you're being tested for the content. So we're not saying that you need to learn everything from scratch, but you do need to prepare. And there is no test in your life that you would walk into unprepared, right? You would never walk into your driver's test unprepared. You would never walk into your final exam unprepared. So that being said, now everybody's in line, the test takers, the test makers, and people like us who help people prepare, that you have to prepare for these tests.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember when I took the SAT, I think then it was, if you don't know the answer, just don't answer it, because you would be penalized. So now you're almost encouraged to guess and take a good chance, right, on previous knowledge.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about what test prep looks like with Test Rocker because it's different, it's unique, but we're going to get into that in a moment. One thing that I do want to discern is what's the basic difference between ACT and SAT, and why would a student choose one over the other?
Yeah, so what we say to all kids is that you never know which one you're going to do better at until you have either taken some sort of a diagnostic test or you've actually prepared for both and then gone in and seen which one you performed better at. The biggest differences between the tests is that the ACT has a science section. That being said, it doesn't mean that you need to know everything about chemistry, biology, and physics. It just means that you need to be able to look at an experiment and understand, what is it actually testing for? And it goes into reading comprehension, basically. So one thing I always tell students is just because it says science, don't freak out. But that is a big difference between the two. The ACT is shorter, but it has a lot of questions. In terms of, it's about 2 hours, 50 minutes long, but it has a lot of questions. And then the SAT is 3 hours, but the content is difficult. So I would say the biggest differences really are the way they question you. At the end of the day, the goal is the same. They're trying to get you to see how college ready you really are. So the concepts and the basics and the fundamentals are the same, which is why we tell students, hey, if you're preparing for one, you're actually kind of also preparing for the other. There are slight differences in the way you're going to see questions, but we encourage people to take both. If you don't want to take both, then we say, at Test Rocker, we have this thing called a propensity meter. We have students fill out a questionnaire and we can see which way they're skewed. Or they can take a full length test of both and see which one they do better at. So we'll share the propensity meter with your members through social media, if you like.
Okay, that's awesome. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to go into the timeline of testing. It seems like to me that the kids are just testing all year long, or if they're not testing, they're preparing for it. Yeah. But let's talk about Test Rocker a little bit and why it's so unique. I remember, and I know I'm going way back, people, I know. But when I think of my own personal experience with the SAT and, being in a test prep program, we had that big thing we physically had, and we had this massive book in front of us, and it was a very cold and sterile place, and it just felt really weird to be preparing for something that was going to determine my whole future. So let's talk about what Test Rocker experience is like.
Yeah, and I mean, you're saying, oh, it was a long time ago, but you remember it crystal clear, and that's the whole thing. Like, this can be a really scarring, torturous experience. So we want to take that experience out of it and kind of make it as easy and time efficient as possible. Having said that, like you said, there are books that people use to prepare. There are also group classes that students go to. There are also private tutors that students go to. So there are other options. We're not the only option out there. But real quick, like I said, it's all about going back to the concepts. That's what you're being tested for on these tests. So if you learned this stuff in 8th or 9th grade, you really need to go back and drill down and be specific about how you're preparing for the test, which is why looking at one of those crazy books, and the books haven't changed, time might have passed, but the book size is still this big. So it's not going to tell you what you, Gina, need to prepare for, right? So it's kind of just saying, here are 400 pages, go attempt it all. You're not going to be more efficient in how you prepare. So that being said, then there are group classes. A lot of students like to go to group classes because they're sitting with other students and preparing at the same time.
Sorry about that. Hold on a second. What's going on here? I can't take this call. I don't even know where my cell phone is. It'll end. Okay, it ends. Go ahead.
So the other technology, right? So the other option is group classes, and a lot of students like to go to these because they can study with their peers. The reality is that it is something that you should prepare for on your own, because what you need to know is different from what I need to know.
Gotcha.
Of how to improve our scores, right? So no two students are exactly the same. You might be better at math and I might be better at reading. So why should we go to a group class and both focus on writing if neither of us really needed to focus on that? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So group classes also tend to teach the average. You might be somebody who's really good at a certain topic. If they're teaching that to the average, it doesn't matter. You've already kind of lost interest in that topic. If you're below average, for example, for me, I was always really bad at algebra. So if they're teaching me in a class and I am already,
Yeah, I was horrible at algebra.
yeah, and I'm already not being able to understand what, they're talking about, I've fallen behind and I've shut down. So group classes teach to the average. Then you have private tutors. Private tutors can be fantastic. Our founder of our program, Suniti, she was originally a private tutor, but they're hard to find. The really good ones are tough to find. They're tough to schedule, and they're really, really expensive. They're in New York. There's a private tutor who charges like $1,000 for 50 minutes. So
wow.
There's a lot of options out there. Having said that, Test Rocker is the one that's kind of the happy medium, but it's also the most effective. The reason it's effective is because we take all of that hard work and guessing on what you need to prepare out of the equation for you. So all you have to do is go online, take a diagnostic test on our website. We give you a customized study plan. That study plan is going to tell you exactly what you need to focus on, exactly how much time you need to spend. As you start working through it, we're going to track all of your progress. Parents get to stay involved because we secretly send them biweekly progress reports. So they don't need to worry about, is my child Michelle actually logging on or not? They can keep track every 2 weeks without having to ask Michelle. And then when you're actually learning, which is the biggest part of our program, it's not about full-length practice tests or any of that. It's just about learning the concepts that you're weaker at. Everything we teach you is done through video explanations. And this is how students learn. They spend all their time on YouTube anyway. So this is something that we've created where they are targeted, customized videos that will tell you exactly everything you need to know about one topic in one video. And then every single question comes with a video explanation as well. So you're learning through Suniti, who is the creator behind this program. And it's like having a private tutor, except you can press pause and run away and come back whenever you really want. And students are known to log on more frequently and learn in shorter increments of time. They don't want to spend 3 hours on a Sunday in a group class preparing for these tests. There's so much more to life than just test prep. And then finally, once you've learned all of the content, then you go into full-length practice tests. So that's how we work. First you learn, then you practice. And that's our approach. Our score improvements have been amazing. Our average ACT score improvement is 4 points. Average SAT is 280 points. We have students in 39 countries, and you log on whenever you want. So you can take it with you on your summer break to the pool or wherever you're going, as long as you have an internet connection. You're good to go.
Okay, I got a quick question for you. Just because I am now a parent of a teenager. Okay, so my daughter logs on. Can you tell whether or not she's logged on and is actively being active, actually doing something? Or they can just log on and meander to Facebook or
so we time out. They might be, they might be logged on and watching a video. So we don't want to time them out every single second that they're not staring necessarily at their screen. So about every 10 minutes, if they haven't done anything, if they haven't moved their cursor on that particular screen or they went away, they kind of get a pop-up that says, hey, we miss you, like come back, where did you go? And also we stop tracking their time at that point. So only when they come back is when, we know there's tricks in but it's the same thing. If they go into a group class, how can you guarantee that your daughter is actually absorbing the information that's being given to her? You can't, because she's sitting in the classroom, but I've walked past many group classes where they're all on their cell phones and they're not paying attention. In this case, we know they're already on the computer, so we're reaching them where they're already wanting to spend time.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, can you hold on 1 second? Talking about daughter. I made that transfer, Elon. Okay. Hi. Okay, sorry about that. Let's talk about when can students begin to study for the test? So you mentioned 11th grade, but I'm going to tell you, I know a lot of parents who are not trying to wait until 11th grade for test prep. They want to test prep as early as 9th grade, and often will meet a little bit of pushback from admissions offices. This is awful. This is awful. This is awful. Hello. I've made the transfer, Elon. You're really messing up the call. Bye. Okay, and I'm not even going to re-record this, people. You're going to hear all of it. This is
This is how it goes. This is the real
this is
world.
how it goes. She
Yeah.
had me transfer. They have one from school today for teacher reporting, so I sent them out, and they needed money. All right, so yeah, so ninth grade.
Look, I mean, I believe that test prep is a finite process. I don't think you need to prepare for like 5 years for this test. So I think that there's a fine balance. You know, I've had parents come up to me when their child was in the 6th grade and say, should I start preparing my child now? I don't think so, because I think at that point you haven't learned, your child hasn't learned the stuff that they need to in order to be able to even start preparing, right? So in 6th grade, you haven't learned the basics of algebra, most likely. So if you haven't, then why are you going to put your child in that setting? Having said that, there are definitely things that you can be doing if you're the parent of, you know, a younger child, 8th, 9th grade, such as helping them with their reading comprehension. So this is going to be a skill that's going to be really important when they do get to the testing time, right? Give them a newspaper. Say, read this article, and then ask them questions after it. What was the author's tone? What was the main idea of this passage? Just basic questions like that. Have a discussion with them. See if they're able to read through a passage in a short amount of time that they haven't seen before, and answer you just normal basic questions. What was this about? Tell me about it. That is a skill that you can get your child to learn much earlier without having to buy any test prep, and just do it at home whenever you have time. So that's something that's important at the young ages. The other thing that's important at younger ages is, you know, really look at how your child is doing on concepts. So once your child does start learning geometry or basics of things, if they're not getting those topics then intervene and make sure they get the help they need to understand those topics. So me, for example, when I was a kid, I got, we need to take it. You can take it.
When you were a kid, Urvi, when you were a kid, I'm just going to text her while you're answering our audience. I'm going to.
When I was a kid, I moved around a lot and I skipped the basics of geometry, and it was a real problem. It hurt my understanding of it, and it actually went and stuck with me all the way through taking the SAT and then even in college, because I didn't understand the fundamentals and the basics. So that's a really important thing. Make sure that your students or your children are doing well on the concepts, especially in math. And then the reading stuff, like I said, you can help them out with. But yeah, the foundations of algebra and geometry are very important. So the earlier they can get to know them and get comfortable with those topics, the better off you are. And then in the 10th grade, and again, we'll talk about this more at the workshop, so I do encourage people to sign up for the 23rd. But in the 10th grade, this is when you really have to partner with your child or your student to create a test taking plan. Which test is your child going to be taking? SAT or ACT or both? The SAT, you should plan to take up to 3 times, no more than that. Like I said, we believe it's a finite process. There's no need to take it 100 times. And the ACT, we say take at least 2 times. If you want to take it 3 times. Both tests you should take more than once, because you could walk into a test day and you're just having a bad day. You slept on the wrong side of the bed. You were hungry. You need to go to the bathroom. I don't know. It could be any such factor. So your entire future doesn't need to feel like it depended on that one attempt. And then also decide on what the test prep method should be. Like I said, you have to prepare. So how are you going to prepare? And then when should the prep begin? Take into account vacations, exams, all of those things. Is grandma going to be visiting? Because if she is, you know, is she going to take up your room? You can't study in there, etc. And then take the PSAT in the 10th grade. If it's offered in your school, take it. It's going to give you a really good understanding of what the test is like. It's going to be a nice light bulb that's going to go off in your child's head that's saying, hey, it's not an easy test. I need to prepare. So those are kind of the basic things. Like I said earlier, there are still things you can do. I just don't personally recommend, even though I'm a test prep company, I don't tell people they should start preparing too early. Some people do need to take the tests for like high school admission and things like that, in which case you should prepare for that, of course.
That's great. And I look forward to blogs later, or even at one of our workshops around what parent engagement really looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Grade, focusing or 8th and 9th grade rather, focusing on reading comprehension. I mean, you just ask some questions like, what's the tone? Like, what questions do we ask, right? So go read that article in the New York Times. What's the tone? And, it's just knowing exactly what these tests are asking for and being able to make those same questions. So I look forward to that. You mentioned something, taking the SAT 3 times, ACT 2 times. My oldest hasn't even reached 10th grade yet. So are we talking about 3 times practice test or like 3 actual session, sitting in on actual exams?
Official exams, actually going, registering, and taking the official exams. Because, on the SAT, for example, they allow this thing called super scoring, which means, say I take the test the first time and I do really well on the math section, but not as well on reading. The second time I go in, I don't do as well on math, but I do really well on reading. The universities most of them are willing to accept your super score, which is that first attempt where you did really well in math, plus the second attempt where you did really well in reading. So that can boost people's scores by a couple of 100 points without even realizing it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I
it's
think
like combining the best of each test, it sounds like. That's awesome.
Yeah, you said it better than me. So yeah, that's what it is. And, I think that's an important thing for parents to look at with their students early on, to say, you're going to take this test 3 times. If you're going to take it 3 times, the first time you should take it on. It's only offered 6 or 7 times a year, depending on where you're at. So you have to pick those test dates. You have to register for them in advance. You have to prepare for those test dates. You're not going to walk in unprepared. And every single time you should be preparing in between the attempts as well, right? So between the first and second attempt, I expect your score to increase, because you should have spent more time focusing in on those things that you needed to improve. So I think it's very important for parents to support their kids through this process. This is a very overwhelming stage. You're still scarred about your process from when you took it. And, I think if parents sat down with their kids and said, this is the first step toward college, so make it a big picture thing. It's an annoying test. It sucks, but we all have to take it. So let's look at the big picture. Doing well on this test is going to make it possible for you, Michelle, to apply to NYU, and you've always wanted to go to NYU. So let's get to that point. If you put it all in perspective with that big picture, that's what makes it all worthwhile. Because otherwise, for a student, they're spending all these hours taking all of these tests, and it's very hard to keep it all in perspective, because there's so many things going on. And this is the first experience with college applications that your child's going to have.
Yeah. So on the 23rd, your workshop is entitled Test Taking Tips for All Test Takers. Mm-hmm. And I think what I'm looking forward to is that it's going to be a wider scope, because we're going to have families there who are applying to middle school, high school, lower school, among independent schools, and those who are currently enrolled and kind of like are just coming back for our workshop specific to what they want. But this is about tips for all test takers, no matter where you're coming in. We're going to touch a little bit upon that and then kind of work our way into SAT and ACT, right?
Yeah, I think all tests go hand in hand. At the end of the day, there are skills involved. So these aren't going to be like basic strategies or anything that we're giving, but it's more giving all of the information that you need to really be prepared for tests. And then we'll go more specifically into SAT, ACT, etc. So at the end of the day, the whole process is leading ultimately to that college acceptance, right? So yeah, we're going to cover all the topics.
Yeah, perfect. So what would you say is, if we were to give families one thing to do right now, right, in learning a little bit more about Test Rocker, what should they do? Where should they go on your website to learn a little bit more? We're going to share even more on the 23rd of April, and then we'll have our own little curriculum-based workshop later in the spring. But where do you want them to go on the site? Where should they land?
So if you're just looking for information, go to www.testrocker.com, TESTROCKER.com. And if you're a teacher, we have information for schools and counselors too. And then if you're looking for something specific, you have questions, we help guide you through this whole process. So you can always email us at contactus@testrocker.com. And any questions relating to test prep or the college process, we're willing to help with for free. So let us know, and we'll get back to you.
And you'll get to meet Sunithi on the website too, right? The ultimate tutor who
She's an amazing.
I have transparent. So Sunithi is the tutor who's traveled around the world tutoring students and helping them become really successful with standardized tests, ACT and SAT. And you and your sister are Sunithi's daughters. So family organization, right?
Yes.
And we're really excited about that.
Yeah, it's, you know, when you quit your jobs to support something like this, then you know it's a big cause. So it's fun to work with our mom because she is really an amazing teacher. I was on a plane recently, and this girl was sitting 2 seats down from me, and I had never met this girl before. I guess I look a little like my mom, and this girl looked at me and she said, "Are you Urvi Mathur's mom?" And I said, "Yes." And this was at Newark Airport. And she said, "Your mom changed my life." And I said, "How is that? I don't even know who you are." And she was like, "Your mom's the reason I got into NYU, and now I'm at Tisch, and I get to do all these things, and it's all thanks to her." So I talked to her for a very long flight after that. But you know, she does with her approach and her method to these scores, but also with the guidance and the support you get with Test Rocker. It's all based on what she wanted to do and her dream. So that's what we do every day. And that's a big difference about Test Rocker versus many other test prep companies, is that SAT, ACT is what we do 24 hours a day. We don't sell GMAT products. We don't sell any other products. So this is our bread and butter. And that's really important to look at when you're thinking about a test prep product, right? It doesn't matter if they give you your money back guarantee, because if your child doesn't do well, by the time you get your money back, the application deadline has passed. So think about a lot of those things as you're preparing and picking those methods. We're SAT, ACT all day, every day.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Urvi, for being an affiliate of our RISE Network, for being a sponsor at the RISE Parent Power Conference on Saturday, April 23rd, and for continuing to educate our families so that they can better engage their students and support their students/children as they continue on their educational journey. So we'll see you on April 23rd. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thanks, Gina.
Okay. Bye.